Thank you so much, Tim and Matt and everybody. It's such an honour to be here. I've been a great fan of Hillsdale for a while, and so to be here today is such a thrill. I guess to start, I'll just say that the 2020 election was a great disappointment to Conservatives and Patriots, but it was also a rare opportunity. I see it as a sort of a wormhole into another dimension. It allowed us, for once, to see how our democracy now works. It's not, you know, where people get together on election day and they elect the leaders who are going to enact policies that are good for the country and that they broadly agree with. No, what we have is a situation, or certainly we had in 2020, where our betters decided that we were going to get the leaders that they wanted. And they did that by showing their relationship with big tech, the mainstream media, the intelligence services, most especially the FBI. And so they had determined that Donald Trump was an existential threat, that, in the words of the liberal atheist public intellectual Sam Harris, Donald Trump was like a meteorite that was hurtling towards Earth, and you would do anything to save the planet from such a threat. And of course, that's what they did. And even some people who regard themselves as patriots and good moral people did the wrong thing to ensure that Donald Trump did not get elected. And that's because they feel that they are morally and intellectually superior to the American people, and that they have to protect the American people from themselves and from their poor choices, like voting for Donald Trump, or driving a real car, or eating meat, or not getting a COVID jab every couple of minutes. So what we saw from them in 2020 was their decision that Joe Biden would become the president. And I note today that Joe Biden has yet again fallen up the stairs of Air Force Two in Poland. And, not to disrespect the Commander-in-Chief, but I will note that he does have certain cognitive and ethical problems, but that these were manifestly evident before the 2020 election, I would argue many decades before. And but that did not matter. You know, he was not Donald Trump. That was all that mattered. So we can thank Sam Harris for being honest and to sort of blurt out what his ilk had been blurring for the previous 2 years. And I think my personal understanding and view through the wormhole came about because of the Hunter Biden laptop. And it was about a month before the election. It was late on a Friday night, and I got a text message from Bob Costello, who was Rudy Giuliani's lawyer. And Rudy Giuliani, of course, was Donald Trump's lawyer. And he just sent me 3 photographs, and he said, this is legitimate. We should talk about this in the morning. And the photographs were from Hunter Biden's laptop. They were not pornographic. I'm glad to say I probably wouldn't have called him back, but which was unusual because most of the photographs on that laptop are pornographic, not most, but a lot of them. But one of them, were a very arresting photograph, was the middle-aged son of Joe Biden, candidate for president, asleep with a crack pipe in his mouth. And so I thought, well, could be a good story. So I had long conversations the next day with Bob Costello and Rudy Giuliani. Now, both of them had worked for the Southern District of New York. Of course, Rudy Giuliani was the mayor who saved New York, and Bob Costello had been very close to him as I think he was associate head of the criminal division of the Southern District of New York, or the Sovereign District of New York, as it used to be called. Very powerful position, and a mind like a steel trap. And he actually first had a copy of Hunter Biden's laptop on a hard drive since the end of August, when the John Paul MacIsaac, who was the owner of a small computer repair store in Delaware, just in the local shopping centre next to where Joe Biden and his son Hunter both lived. And John Paul MacIsaac had received this laptop from Hunter Biden in April of 2019. Hunter had brought it off. It was waterlogged. It was difficult to access. And so John Paul MacIsaac had to upload very slowly this broken laptop onto his mainframe computer in the store. And while he was doing that, he did notice that there was a lot of porn. But he also noticed documents and so on. Words like barisma came up a lot. And not that he was reading at that stage, he was just doing his job. But Hunter Biden never came back to pick up his laptop. He never paid his $85 bill. And so after 90 days, the work order that Hunter Biden signed that rainy night in April 2019 ensured that John Paul MacIsaac was now the legal owner of the laptop. And it just sat on a shelf for quite a while. But John Paul MacIsaac happened to be a Republican voter, and he happened to be a big fan of Donald Trump, which is not a crime. And he had noticed, watching his television, that Donald Trump was enmeshed in this Ukraine scandal, which would become the impeachment that Nancy Pelosi was pushing. And he noticed a word, barisma, which he recognised from the laptop. So he went back and he opened the laptop and he looked it up, and he is a very smart guy and very analytical, very good at putting two and two together. And he was horrified by what he saw on the laptop. Not just the porn or the drug use, but really the evidence that he thought was somehow related to our national security. And so he decided that he had to do something with it, and so he contacted the FBI. And, he's a law-abiding man, and he wasn't going to the media. He went to the authorities. And he tried to impress upon the FBI the national security implications of what was on the laptop, because what he'd seen was vast sums of money that were being paid by countries like China, Russia, Ukraine, Kazakhstan, Romania. Not exactly, upright citizen countries. A lot of very corrupt countries were paying money to the Biden family, not just Hunter Biden, but his uncle Jim Biden, who's Joe Biden's younger brother. That was throughout Joe Biden's vice presidency. And there's also evidence on the laptop that Joe Biden had met with many of these, at least a dozen, we've now counted, of Hunter Biden and Jim Biden's overseas business partners, which flew in the face of his repeated denials during the election campaign that he knew anything about his son Hunter's overseas business dealings. He would get very angry and bark at journalists who dared to bring up the topic, so many of them just didn't. And so this phone call from Rudy Giuliani and Bob Costello, with these phone calls I had the next day, obviously had to go up the line. And so I would say the unsung hero in all of this, and the man that I dedicated the book to is Cole Allen, who was my editor at the New York Post, the top editor at the New York Post at the time. He's an Australian from a country town in Australia called Dubbo, and he knows a story, and he's very courageous. And so it took a lot of courage for them, for the newspaper, for all the editors, to go ahead and publish a story that was really detrimental to one of the two candidates for president just 3 weeks before the 2020 election. And of course, there was a flurry of activity. My very talented colleagues like Emma Jo Morris nailed all the details of the laptop, talked to John Paul MacIsaac, got hold of the subpoena that he'd been given by the FBI in December 2019 when they finally agreed to take possession of the laptop. And we published on October 14, 2020. And within hours, the story was throttled online. It was censored and suppressed by Facebook and Twitter, and no doubt Google. Even now, if you try and do a Google search of Hunter Biden and the New York Post, you won't find very much. You find all the fake cover-up stories in the Washington Post or the New York Times or Mother Jones or Rolling Stone. So what we had was Facebook and Twitter just decided. They each had a different reason. In Twitter's case, it was that we had apparently violated their hacked material policy, even though nothing about our story or the laptop was hacked. For Facebook, they said they were suppressing the reach of the story pending fact-checking. Well, 2.5 years later, there's been no fact-check. And the reason I know that is because I've talked to many of the other recipients of the emails on the laptop, and that's the first and easiest way of verifying material on the laptop is just to contact people who received the same emails that Hunter Biden was on and ask them, have you ever seen this email? Is this your email? And all of them say yes. We verified this laptop in a number of ways, but I always look at the laptop, especially when I was writing the book and continue to report on it, as just one piece of the jigsaw puzzle. It's actually not enough on its own. You need the material that Tony Bobulinski also provided the FBI back before the 2020 election. Tony Bobulinski was a former business partner of Hunter Biden. He was involved in one of the big Chinese deals. And he is an unimpeachable source. He is a naval veteran from a family, 3 generations of military veterans. He has a top secret security clearance from the NSA. He's a successful and honest businessman. So he came forward because he's a patriot. Also he felt aggrieved because I think he was ripped off by the Bidens, like everyone is eventually. But he was just an honest broker. And he went to the FBI before the 2020 election voluntarily. He had a 5.5-hour interview with them in the Washington field office. He handed over the contents of his 3 phones, and he never heard from them again.